They said the old man had gone soft in the head. That was the kind thing to say. The unkind version, the one they said at the feed store, the one they said with a laugh that didn't quite land, was that Amos Kettleman had spent 11 years digging his own grave with a hand shovel and just hadn't had the sense to lie down in it yet. I said it too. God help me, I said it more than most. I'm telling you that up front so you know what kind of man is doing the telling. I'm not the hero of this. I'm the one who watched and laughed when it was easy to laugh, and then stopped laughing so fast it felt like the ground had come out from under me. Because here's the thing nobody in Coyle County will admit, even now, even with the cottonwoods grown tall enough to shade a full-grown horse, everything that saved us was built by the man we mocked. Every gallon, every green blade, built by one pair of old, ruined hands in a valley we all agreed was dead, for a reason none of us guessed until it was almost too late to say sorry. This is what I saw, this is what he made, and this is the part I still can't forgive myself for. The morning the third heifer went down, I stopped counting in my head and started counting in the book. I keep a book, little leather thing, corners chewed soft, fits in a shirt pocket. My daddy kept one for tallying stock, and I kept one because, well, if I'm honest, because writing a number down makes it feel like I'm doing something about it. And most mornings that summer, writing a number down was the only thing I could do about anything. 3 head lost since Sunday. I wrote 3. Then I sat on the top rail of the corral and looked at it like the number might argue back. It didn't, numbers never do. That's why I like them. The drought had a sound by then. People don't tell you that. They tell you drought is dry, drought is dust. Drought is the sky going white and staying white for so long you forget it was ever any other color. Nobody tells you it has a sound, but it does. It's the sound of nothing. No creek talk. No frogs. The wind came through the dead grass and it didn't rustle. It just hissed, low and even, like the whole county had sprung a slow leak and was letting the air out one long breath at a time. That heifer lay in the north pasture with her ribs going like a bellows and her eye rolled up at me, and I did the arithmetic I'd been doing all summer. Water in the tank, 2 days maybe. Hay in the barn, gone by the 10th. Money in the bank to buy more of either, I'll spare you. The arithmetic all came out the same. It came out sell what walks, shoot what can't, and pray the bank waits till fall. I did not want to shoot the heifer. I want that on the record. But I did it, because that's the kind of mercy the summer left us. And then I walked back to the house with the rifle heavy in my hand and my book heavy in my pocket, and I wrote another number, and I sat down at the kitchen table and put my head in my hands like a much older man. My name's Cole Merrick. I was 31 that year and I felt 60. You have to understand how we all felt about Amos to understand what came after. He'd been a fixture my whole life. The way a fence post is a fixture, you don't think about it. It's just been there longer than you have. When I was a boy, he ran a decent little cow-calf operation out past the Dry Fork, and folks said he was a hard worker and a fair hand and not much of a talker, which around here is the highest praise a man can get. He had a wife, Della. I remember her better than I remember him from those years, which is strange, because she died when I couldn't have been more than 9. I remember she gave out peppermints at the church, and she had a laugh you could hear across a room, a big, warm, barking laugh that didn't match how small she was. And then she was gone, a fever, quick and stupid and unfair, the way it took people then, and after that Amos went quiet in a way that's hard to describe. Not sad exactly. Sad you can be around. This was more like a door closing. He sold off his herd within the year. Everybody figured he'd sell the land too and move into town, take a room, drink himself gentle into old age like men do. Instead, he bought more. That was the first crazy thing. He took what he got for the cattle and he bought the Dry Fork Valley, 300 acres of the worst ground in the county, ground so bad the bank practically paid him to take it. Because here's what the Dry Fork was. It was a wide, low, bone-colored bowl of a valley where a real river used to run, back before anybody's granddaddy, back before the map. The river had changed course or dried up or gone underground, nobody knew which, and what it left behind was a dead place. Alkali flats that shone white in the sun. A few skeletons of cottonwoods, gray and limbless, standing around like they'd forgotten to fall down. Not a drop of surface water for miles. You couldn't run stock on it. You couldn't farm it. You couldn't do anything with the dry fork but look at it and feel a little worse about the world. Amos bought it, moved a wagon and a tent down into the middle of it, and started to dig. I was a kid, so at first it was just gossip that floated over my head. You hear old kettlemans out there with a shovel, digging what, digging for what? Nobody knew. He wasn't looking for gold, there was no gold. He wasn't sinking a well you dig straight down and be done, and this was different. This went on. This went on for years. By the time I was grown enough to ride out there myself and see, the story had settled into the shape it kept for the rest of his life. Amos Kettleman had lost his mind out in the dry fork, and the kind thing was to leave him to it. I rode out once when I was maybe 19, on a dare from some other young fools to see the crazy old man. I remember topping the rise on the east side of the valley and looking down and seeing him, this small stooped figure way out in the white glare, doing something to the ground with a mattock, moving so slow you'd have thought he was underwater. There was a mule. There were mounds of dug earth. There were lines scratched into the valley floor that didn't make any sense to me, curving lines, like somebody had been drawing in the dirt with a stick the size of a man. I didn't ride down. I'm not proud of that. I sat my horse on the rise and watched him for a while, and then I turned around and rode home, and when the other fools asked what he was doing, I said, digging his grave. Slow. And they laughed and I laughed, and that was the story I told for 12 years because it was easy and it got a laugh, and it let me not think about the fact that a man was out there in the sun, alone, day after day after day, doing something with such patience that it scared me a little. That's the truth of mockery, if you want it. Mostly we mock the things that scare us. And a man who'll spend his whole life on something you can't understand, that scares you more than any wild thing on four legs. Now the summer of the drought. By August we were past desperate and into that flat, quiet place beyond desperate, where nobody's shouting anymore because shouting takes water too. The county had a meeting at the Grange Hall. 50, 60 families, all of us hollow-eyed, all of us doing the same arithmetic in our heads. The talk was about hauling water in by truck from 2 counties over at a price that would ruin us, and about which of us would go under first, and whether the state would send anybody, and everybody knew the answer to that last one was no. It was old Prout who said it. Ferris Prout ran sheep up on the mesa, 70-odd years old and mean as a cornered badger. He stood up in the back and he said, in that dry, cracking voice of his, "Kettleman's got water." The room sort of laughed, that tired laugh. Somebody said, "Kettleman's got a hole in the ground and a screw loose," and got a bigger laugh. But Prout didn't sit down. He said, "No, I'm telling you. My grandson flew that crop duster over the dry fork last week, took a shortcut home, and he come back white as a sheet. Says the whole valley floor's green." Silence then, a different kind. "Green," Prout said again. "Green as June in the middle of all this." He gestured at the window, at the white sky, at the death outside. "You explain that to me." Nobody could. And I sat there in the back of that hall with my little book in my pocket and my 3 dead cattle written in it, and I felt something cold walk up my spine because I remembered the lines scratched in the dirt. The curving lines, 12 years of them. I didn't sleep that night. Before dawn, I saddled up and rode for the dry fork, and I told myself I was going to see about buying water, and that was half true, and the other half, the half I didn't say out loud even to my horse, was that I needed to see with my own eyes what a man could make out of nothing if you gave him long enough and left him alone. I want to be careful how I tell this next part because I've told it wrong before. I've told it big, made a speech of it. It wasn't big. It was quiet. It was the quietest thing I ever saw. I topped the same east rise I'd sat on when I was 19. The sun was just coming up behind me, and it threw my shadow and my horse's shadow long down the slope ahead, out into the valley. And the valley was green. Not all of it. I don't want to lie to you and say I looked down on a Garden of Eden, because it wasn't that. Most of the dry fork was still white and dead. But down the center of it, following those curving lines I'd seen a decade before, ran a living thing. A ribbon of green. Grass, real grass, deep and thick, and reeds and low brush. And here and there a young cottonwood standing with actual leaves on it. Actual green leaves throwing actual shade. And the leaves were moving. And it took me a second to understand why they were moving, and the answer knocked the wind out of me. They were moving because there was water under them, and the water was moving. I rode down slow, the way you'd walk into a church you weren't sure you belonged in. Close up, I could finally read what he'd made. Those curving lines were channels, hand-dug channels, lined with flat stone, fitted so careful they held water like a trough, running along the contours of the valley so gentle and so clever that the water walked itself downhill at a pace slow enough to soak in and not wash out. There were catch basins, little stone-walled pools set at the low points, brimming and clear. There were check dams made of piled rock, dozens of them, hundreds maybe, each one no bigger than a bushel basket, each one placed to slow the water a hair more so the ground could drink. And I understood, standing there with my mouth open like the fool I was, what he'd done. He hadn't dug a well. He hadn't found water. He'd done something so much harder and so much slower that I hadn't been able to imagine it. None of us had. He'd found where the old buried river still moved, deep down, and over 11 years, one shovelful at a time, one stone at a time, one basin at a time, he had coaxed it back up to the light. He had taught a dead valley to hold on to what little came to it. He had built, by hand, a machine with no moving parts, made of dirt and rock and patience, and the machine's only job was to keep water alive in a place that had forgotten how. I got off my horse. I knelt down by one of the channels. I put my hand in it, and the water was cold and it moved against my fingers, and I am not ashamed to tell you I started to cry, right there, 31 years old, kneeling in the dirt in the valley we all called a dead man's grave. That's when I heard him behind me. "You'll want to keep your horse off the young grass," Amos Kettleman said. "Roots aren't set." I turned around, and there stood the crazy old man, leaning on the same mattock I'd watched him swing when I was 19, and I opened my mouth to say, I don't know what. Something. And he looked at me, and looked at the book that had fallen out of my pocket into the dirt, and looked back at the ruin of the county laid out white and dying beyond the green, and he said the thing I've never gotten out of my head. He said, "Took you long enough." He made coffee. That's the detail nobody believes when I tell it. A man builds a miracle in a dead valley, and the first thing he does when the world finally shows up is put a battered pot on a little fire and make coffee, black and bitter, in 2 tin cups, one of which had a woman's initials scratched into the bottom. DK, I turned it over and saw them and set it down careful, like it might break, though it was only tin. "Della's," he said, not asking. "I remember her," I said, "the peppermints." Something moved across his face, not a smile, the place where a smile used to live. We sat on 2 stumps by the fire, and I asked him the question the whole county would ask within a week. I asked him why. Why the valley? Why 11 years? Why not just leave when she died? Why do this impossible thing all alone with nobody to see? And he was quiet so long I thought he wouldn't answer. The water made its small sound in the channels. A bird I hadn't heard in that country in years, some little marsh thing, called once from the reeds. "She wanted to live here," he said finally. "Everybody said it couldn't be done. Ground's dead, they said. She didn't believe in dead. She'd stand right up there," he nodded at the east rise where I'd sat and mocked him twice, "and she'd say, 'Amos, there's water in this valley. I can feel it. It's just lonely. It just needs somebody to call it up.'" He turned the tin cup in his ruined hands. "I told her we'd do it, when there was time, when there was money, when the cattle were doing better. You know how it is. There's always a when." "And then the when ran out," I said. "The when ran out," he agreed. She died believing me that I'd make the valley live. He set the cup down. So I made the valley live, simple as that. A man keeps his word to his wife, even the ones he made too late. I want to tell you I said something wise. I didn't. I sat there and looked at my own hands, which had never in my life kept at any one thing for 11 years, which had shot a heifer that morning because I couldn't figure out how to save her, and I felt about 2 inches tall. Here's where the hard part comes. The part I said at the start that I can't forgive myself for. Word got out the way it does. Within 3 days there was a line of trucks and wagons parked along the East Rise, and half the county standing up there looking down at the green like pilgrims, and the other half already arguing about it. Because that's what people do. Give a dying county one drop of hope, and inside of a week they'll be fighting over whose drop it is. There was talk, I heard it. I'll admit I was in the room for some of it, about the water rights. About how technically the Dry Fork sat above a shared aquifer, and how technically Amos couldn't just keep all that water for himself while decent families went under, and how somebody ought to do something. Ferris Prout, who'd been the one to tell us, was loudest of all now, of course. That's how it goes. The man who finds the treasure is first in line to say it belongs to everybody. And there was worse. There was a fellow from the county, a smooth one, in a clean shirt, which by itself made us all suspicious, who came out to assess the valley, and who let it be known that a man of Amos's advanced years and history of mental instability maybe oughtn't to be trusted with a resource so vital to the public good, and that there were mechanisms by which the county could take stewardship. They were going to take it from him. That's the plain fact. The valley he'd built with his own body over 11 years, they were going to take it, and they were going to do it wearing clean shirts and using the word stewardship, and I sat in those meetings and I did not stand up. That's my sin, not the mockery. Any fool mocks. My sin is that I'd knelt in his water and cried, I'd held his dead wife's cup, I knew what he was and what it cost him, and when they came to take it, I sat on my hands because my own cattle were dying and I wanted the water too. It was Amos himself who ended it. Of course it was. He rode into town, first time in years anybody'd seen him in town, on that same old mule, and he came to the Grange Hall in the middle of the shouting, and the room went dead quiet the way a room does when the person being argued about walks in. He stood in the doorway with his hat in his hands. He was smaller than I remembered from the fire. Old men get small. He said, "You don't have to take it." Just that, and then into the silence. "You think I built it for me, an old man alone, what I need 300 acres of grass for? I got a mule and a tent." He looked around the room and I swear his eyes stopped on me for a half-second, or I've told myself they did. "I built it because she said the valley wasn't dead. She said it was lonely." Well, his voice caught just barely and he pushed through it. "It's not lonely anymore, is it? There's a whole county standing up on that rise, so come down off the rise. Bring your stock. Bring your kids. The channels'll take more than mine. I built 'em bigger than I needed in case." He put his hat back on. "In case of exactly this, I reckon. Della always said think ahead." And he turned around and rode home, and left us all standing there feeling like what we were. We came down off the rise. That fall, that terrible killing fall when every other valley in 3 counties turned to bone, the Dry Fork carried us. Not all of us, not all the stock, but enough. Enough families kept enough cattle alive on the grass Amos grew and the water Amos called up that when the rains finally came the next spring, there was still a county here to get rained on. Kids who'd have been moved to some city, some job in some other life, grew up here instead. My own ranch is one of the ones that made it. I'd be a liar and worse than a liar if I didn't say so plain. I am here, writing this, because of the man I called crazy for 12 years. Amos didn't make it to the next spring. I don't think it was any one thing. The doctor said his heart, and I suppose that's true as far as it goes. But I was one of the ones who took turns sitting with him at the end, out in his tent in the valley because he wouldn't be moved to town, and I think the plainer truth is that a man can pour himself into a thing for 11 years, empty himself right out into the ground one shovelful at a time, And when the thing is finally done, and finally full of the people it was meant for, there's just not so much of the man left to keep going. He'd been keeping a promise. The promise was kept. I think he was tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix. The last night I sat with him, the water was loud in the channel's spring melt starting to come down, and he was mostly gone, drifting, talking to somebody who wasn't me. He said her name a few times, and once clear as anything he said, "See, told you it wasn't dead." And he smiled, the real one, the one that had been away so long, and I looked away because a man deserves privacy for a thing like that even at the end. We buried him in the valley, in the green under the biggest of the cottonwoods, next to a smaller stone that had been there all along, that none of us had ever known about, with the initials DK worn soft. I take my own kids out there now. The cottonwoods are tall. The little marsh birds are back for good. My oldest asked me last week why the old man built it, and I opened my mouth to give her the whole thing, the promise, the wife, the 11 years, the county saved, and I found I couldn't get it into words that would fit a child. So I just told her he built it because somebody he loved said the valley was lonely. She thought about that. Then she asked if the valley was happy now. I still keep the book. I don't tally losses in it anymore.